What if in the most unlikely place you found not just a refuge, but a new reason to live? Would you have the courage to start over? Hi, I'm Yuna, and I welcome you to Happiness of Love. Get ready for an exciting story that will leave you amazed. Enjoy the video, and may God bless you and your entire family. Have an amazing day. The smell of burning sugar sent Charlotte Green running to the oven, her footsteps echoing across the bakery's worn wooden floor. Lily, sitting at the counter in an apron that looked 3 times her size, laughed. "Mommy, you burned the cookies again." Charlotte sighed, quickly opening the oven and letting out a muffled exclamation as she looked at the darkened cookies. "It's not my fault that Christmas insists on coming faster every year," she murmured, while Lily played with a little plasticine snowman that she had made herself. Green and Company Bakery was one of the oldest and most beloved places in Maplewood, a town that lived and breathed the Christmas spirit. The storefronts were covered in artificial snowflakes, and the streets, decorated with twinkling lights, looked like something out of a postcard. Charlotte loved this time of year, despite the chaos. It was the season when her bakery was packed, and she barely had time to breathe, but it was also the season when her daughter Lily shined with the same enthusiasm as the lights that decorated the city. As Charlotte tidied up the ruined cookies, the familiar sound of the bell on the door echoed. "Welcome to Green and Company," she said, without even looking, busy with the hot tray. But the customer did not respond immediately. When Charlotte looked up, a handsome man wearing a crisp black overcoat was standing in the doorway, looking out of place in the store's cozy and somewhat cluttered setting. Lucas Graham took a hesitant step inside, adjusting his scarf around his neck. He wasn't used to places like this. Small, full of mixed smells and people genuinely smiling. Everything was different from the world he lived in, made of glass skyscrapers and meetings full of rehearsed speeches. He felt out of place there, but the sound of children's laughter and the heat emanating from the room had something strangely comforting. "Good morning," he said, his serious voice cutting through the air as if he were in a corporate negotiation. "I'm looking for strong coffee and something sweet." Charlotte blinked, trying to decipher the stranger. What was someone with such a refined air and such a lost look doing in Maplewood? She wiped her hands on her apron and indicated the menu on the wall. "We have filtered coffee and a house special, caramel apple pie. It's simple, but it's everyone's favorite." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Simple will do." While she prepared the order, Lucas observed the environment. The bakery had walls with peeling paint, but full of paintings with old photos of the city. There was a Christmas tree in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments, clearly the work of children. Lucas felt a pang of nostalgia, something he rarely experienced. Lily, curious as always, decided it was time to interact. "Are you from here? I don't remember seeing you before." Lucas looked at her, surprised, and then smiled slightly. "No, I'm new in town. Do you like living here?" Lily shrugged. There's snow, lights, and Mom makes the best gingerbread cupcakes in the world." She turned to Charlotte. "Isn't it, Mommy?" Charlotte, laughing, placed the coffee and pie on the counter. "The girl doesn't lie." "I hope you like it," she said, looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Lucas took the first bite of the pie, and something unexpected happened. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of peace. Maybe Maplewood had more to offer than he realized. Snow fell softly outside the bakery, gathering in delicate drifts that reflected the colorful lights of Maplewood streets. Inside, the warmth was almost palpable, not just from the old heater humming gently in the corner, but from the welcoming atmosphere that Charlotte had built over the years. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla permeated the air, while sounds of laughter and conversation filled the space. The store was full that late afternoon, a meeting point for residents to exchange stories and make plans for the upcoming Christmas festival. Lucas walked through the door again, the bell tinkling like an almost annoying announcement of his presence. Charlotte looked up from the counter, immediately recognizing the serious-looking man who had been there the previous morning. He seemed different now, less distant but still clearly out of place. His gaze wandered around the space before landing on her. She tightened her apron in an almost imperceptible gesture, feeling a mixture of curiosity and a slight irritation that she couldn't identify. He approached the counter slowly, his firm footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Charlotte realized, with a touch of surprise, that he was holding a folded piece of paper, probably the festival flyer that she had placed in the paper bag with the pie. "He stopped in front of you, his expression as unreadable as last time. Do you always put advertisements in customers' bags, or was I a special case?" he asked, his voice filled with a sarcastic tone that made Charlotte raise an eyebrow. She responded without hesitation. "It's Christmas, and the festival is the soul of the city at this time. I thought maybe you needed a little Christmas spirit. Or coffee." She gestured to the chalkboard nearby, where she had drawn a snowman holding a steaming cup. Lucas blinked slowly, as if he was processing what she had said. "Spirit," he muttered to himself, as if experiencing the word for the first time. It wasn't something he usually thought or felt. Spirituality, festivity, these things always seemed like distractions to him, obstacles that diverted his attention from larger goals. Lucas began, but was interrupted by Lily, who appeared next to Charlotte holding an improvised bouquet of pine leaves and golden bows. "This one's for you," she said, smiling so sweetly that Lucas couldn't help smiling slightly in return. Charlotte, however, was immediately alert. "Lily, honey, you probably don't want. Everything is fine." Lucas accepted the bouquet with a curious hesitation, as if it were something too valuable to be held in hands that were only accustomed to contract pens and state-of-the-art cell phones. "Thank you," he said, and for the first time, Charlotte heard something in his voice, vulnerability. Lily smiled, as if she had achieved something important, and ran to go back to playing with the other decorations she was helping to organize. Lucas was still holding the bouquet when Charlotte turned her attention to him. "You don't seem like the kind of person who likes festivals or anything that involves that." She made a sweeping gesture, indicating the store's exaggerated decor. "And you don't seem like the type to judge others so quickly," he countered, his eyes fixed on hers. There was something about the way he looked at her, like he was trying to decipher her, peel back each layer until he understood exactly who she was. Charlotte felt her cheeks heat up, but it wasn't because of the heater. Perhaps she was exaggerating in her tone, but there was something about Lucas that disconcerted her. He was so different from everyone else in Maplewood. It wasn't just the well-cut suit or the air of someone who belonged to another world, it was the mystery that surrounded him, something she couldn't ignore. "I was just trying to help," she said finally, softening her tone. "Maplewood can be a little intense for those who aren't used to it." Lucas looked down, as if he didn't know how to respond. He was used to confrontations, to discussions at boardroom tables, but this was different. There was an almost disarming honesty in the way Charlotte spoke. "Maybe I should try. The festival, I mean. It could be interesting." His response surprised Charlotte, but she just nodded, going back to busying herself with a request. That night, Lucas walked through the bright streets of Maplewood, Lily's bouquet still in his hands. He felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a lightness, almost as if the weight of his life in New York had been left behind, at least for a moment. As he walked away, Charlotte watched him through the window, feeling something unexpected, a mix of curiosity and uneasiness. He wasn't just a stranger in town. There was something about Lucas Graham that seemed to promise upheaval in his carefully constructed life. The muffled sound of laughter and the crackle of chestnuts being roasted in the open-air market filled the air as Charlotte hurried through Maplewood's main square. Her arms were full of bags filled with decorations and ingredients for the bakery. Beside him, Lily skipped between the piles of snow accumulated at the edges of the sidewalks. The cold wind flushed her cheeks, but nothing seemed to dampen her excitement. "Mommy, look. The band is playing Jingle Bells. Can we stop for a bit?" Charlotte looked at the band in the bandstand decorated with flashing lights and sighed. "Lily, honey, we need to get back before the snow starts to get worse." She knew that telling her daughter no was nearly impossible when Christmas glitter was involved. As she tried to rush Lily, Charlotte felt a familiar discomfort. When he looked up, he found Lucas Graham standing in front of a candy stand, examining a caramel apple as if it were a strange object from another planet. He still wore a smart coat and a stance that screamed out of place, but something about his countenance was different. Maybe it was the slight curve of his lips, almost a smile. Charlotte tried to ignore him and move on, but Lily, with her unfailing curiosity, had already noticed Lucas' presence. "Mr. Bouquet," she shouted, referring to the makeshift bouquet she had given him days before. Charlotte froze, feeling a rush of heat and embarrassment as Lucas looked in her direction, clearly surprised. "Bouquet?" he muttered, raising his eyebrows in a mixture of confusion and amusement. Lily ran towards him, ignoring Charlotte's attempt to hold her back. "Did you come to the festival too? Are you going to eat caramel apples? I like the chocolate one. Do you like chocolate?" Lucas leaned forward slightly, bringing himself closer to Lily's height, something Charlotte hadn't expected from a man with his normally rigid posture. I don't know," he admitted, as if it were the most absurd thing to confess. "Maybe I should try it. What do you suggest?" While Lily prattled on about the best sweets on the market, Charlotte approached, clearly uncomfortable. "Lily, you can't run away like that." Her tone was firm, but Lucas noticed an underlying softness, a concern that came from a genuine place. "Sorry about that." "She was always confident," added Charlotte, giving her a look that seemed to say don't come any closer than that. Lucas just shook his head. "Don't worry. She's persuasive." He straightened up, handing the caramel apple to the vendor. "Sometimes," he continued, looking at Lily, "I think children have more courage than we do." Charlotte was surprised by the comment. There was something in his tone that suggested more than the words implied, as if there was a personal truth behind the statement. She looked away, focusing on the flow of people around the square, trying to ignore the discomfort she felt in his presence. Come on, Lily, we need to go. But before he could take the next step, Lily held Lucas's hand with a beaming smile. You should go on the sleigh ride tonight. It's magical. The horses have bells and the lights shine like stars. Lucas hesitated, looking at the small hand holding his. Charlotte saw the expression on his face change, a moment of vulnerability that he seemed to be struggling to hide. Maybe, he replied, his tone low and uncertain. I don't promise anything. Charlotte gently pulled Lily away, breaking the connection that seemed to be forming. Sorry to bother you. He seemed about to respond, but Charlotte was already walking away, her heart beating fast, although she didn't know exactly why. That night, the sleigh ride was packed with families and couples, all caught up in the Christmas spirit. Charlotte hadn't planned to attend, but Lily had been so insistent that she had given in. Dressed in a red scarf and fuzzy gloves, Lily ran to the sleds while Charlotte stayed behind, watching. The night was clear, and the sound of horse bells mingled with happy voices. And then she saw him. Lucas was there, standing at the edge of the event, clearly uncomfortable but still present. He didn't seem to realize that Charlotte and Lily were there until Lily's voice echoed again. Mr. Bouquet, you really came. Charlotte stood still as Lucas approached. He seemed less distant than before, perhaps because he was already getting used to Maplewood's unique atmosphere. Or maybe it was something more. I couldn't refuse her invitation, he said, gesturing to Lily. Charlotte tried to hide a smile, but she couldn't. As they climbed into the sled together, their closeness seemed inevitable. Lucas was sitting next to Charlotte, with Lily between them, chattering about the lights and the sparkle of the snow. Charlotte felt his every movement, his every breath, as if she were more aware of his presence than she had ever been with anyone else. And Lucas, as he watched the lights reflected in Lily's eyes and Charlotte's restrained smile, felt something he couldn't name. It was a sense of belonging, albeit temporary, as if he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The Maplewood sky was tinged with shades of pink and gold as the sun set, casting a soft light over the main square. The heart of the city vibrated with the energy of the festivities. A row of wooden stalls, decorated with twinkling lights, decorated the place, each selling something unique: handmade ornaments, gingerbread cookies, or steaming mugs of hot chocolate. In the center, a towering Christmas tree towered against the sky, its snow-covered branches and glittering decorations. Charlotte was kneeling near one of the stalls, arranging a stack of boxes full of cupcakes and pies that she had prepared for the festival's charity sale. Lily, as always, was at his side, swinging her legs as she helped tie ribbons to the packages. Charlotte barely had time to notice Lucas Graham approaching, carrying a small wooden cart with boxes of supplies for decorating the tree. When she finally looked up, she saw him in a flannel shirt, rolled-up sleeves, and an oddly focused expression. The contrast with the man in the cardigan and distant gaze who had entered her bakery for the first time was almost shocking. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, unable to resist. Of all the people I expected to see helping decorate the tree, you were at the bottom of the list. Lucas shrugged, with a smile that seemed half defensive and half sincere. I was coerced, or better yet, volunteering. Apparently someone mentioned that I needed more Christmas spirit. Charlotte laughed, the sound light and genuine. Well, I hope the experience isn't too traumatic. We have cookies and hot chocolate for the most dedicated volunteers. Lily, noticing the interaction, ran over to him, pulling his hand as if they were old friends. You can help hang the stars. It's the most fun part. Before Lucas could protest, Lily was dragging him towards the tree, talking non-stop about the best places to put the decorations. As Lucas disappeared into the branches of the tree, Charlotte watched the scene with a sense of unsettling curiosity. There was something about him, a genuine effort to connect, however tentatively, that was beginning to spark more than just curiosity. Lucas found himself climbing a makeshift ladder, balancing a gold star in one hand as Lily gave instructions with the seriousness of a general on campaign. More to the left. No, higher. He tried to hide the smile that threatened to appear, surprised at how easily the child broke through his defenses. Downstairs, Charlotte was organizing the products in the tent, but her eyes kept straying to Lucas and Lily. It was almost disconcerting how he seemed to adapt to everything from the town's children to the most trivial moments at the festival. She noticed little details that had previously escaped her, the way he frowned as he concentrated, the care in every gesture, as if he were trying to adjust to something new. When Lucas came down from the stairs, Lily ran to greet him with a cup of hot chocolate that she had gotten from another stall. It's your reward, she said, holding the glass with both hands. Lucas accepted the chocolate with a solemn nod, as if it were a trophy. Thank you, Commander Lily. Mission accomplished. Charlotte laughed at the comment and motioned for Lucas to join her. He walked to the tent, holding the hot cup between his hands as if it were a rare comfort on a cold day. So, you've been promoted from CEO to Christmas decorator? He took a sip of the chocolate before answering. It seems so. Who knew this could be more challenging than a shareholder council? There was a pause as the two exchanged glances. Charlotte noticed something in his eyes, a softness, perhaps even gratitude, that seemed as out of place as Lucas himself in the city. She almost asked what had brought him to Maplewood, but stopped herself. He had the right to keep her secrets, just as she kept hers. The following days brought more opportunities for Lucas and Charlotte to cross paths. He appeared at the bakery again, this time helping to carry boxes for the festival event. Lily, always eager to see her new friend, made each interaction more natural. In one of these moments, Lucas watched Lily put icing on a star-shaped cookie. He held a piping bag, clearly uncomfortable with the task. Charlotte couldn't hold back her laughter. "You're holding that like a scalpel," she commented, with a slight tease. Lucas gave him a look of mock indignation. "Well, this is more complex than it seems. Icing requires precision, right?" She walked over, taking the pastry bag from his hands and squeezing it demonstratively. "Just go with the flow," she said, tracing a perfect line on the cookie. Lucas watched closely, his eyes focused on the movement of her hands. There was a moment of silence as she finished, and Lucas finally spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "You make it look easy." Charlotte looked up at him, surprised by his unexpectedly soft tone. She opened her mouth to respond, but Lily interrupted. "My mom is the best at this." Charlotte laughed, looking away, but the tension between her and Lucas was palpable. That evening, as she made the final preparations for the next day, Charlotte reflected on the previous days. Lucas Graham wasn't just an outsider, he was a mystery. But more than that, he was starting to become someone she couldn't ignore. And Lucas, sitting alone in the cabin he had rented, held the bouquet Lily had given him on their first date, the smell of pine needles bringing back memories of a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. The bakery was quiet that afternoon, a rare lull amid the busy rush that dominated the Christmas season in Maplewood. Charlotte was in the small office in the back, leafing through an old recipe book looking for something special for the upcoming communal supper. Sunlight streamed in through the window, bathing the wooden table in warm tones. Lily, in the main hall, played with an ornament she had received at the festival market. That was when the sound of a cell phone alert echoed in the room. It wasn't the usual sound of notifications that Charlotte heard from customers or Lily asking to watch another cartoon. It was a more intense, urgent sound. She ignored it at first, until the noise repeated. Curious, Charlotte got up and walked to the counter where Lucas used to leave his cell phone when he came to help her with small repairs or carried goods for the festival. The device vibrated incessantly, the screen flashing with news notification messages. Unintentional of invading her privacy, but unable to ignore what was clearly happening, Charlotte saw the headline on the illuminated screen: CEO Lucas Graham embroiled in controversy, fraud accusations and stock drop. The name seemed to scream at her, and for a moment, Charlotte froze. She didn't know what was more shocking: the fact that Lucas was a renowned businessman, which explained his reserved behavior and his suspicious look, or the fact that he was at the center of a scandal of seemingly enormous proportions. The man who had been decorating Christmas trees, helping Lily frost her cookies, and carrying boxes of cupcakes wasn't just a casual visitor. He was running away from something big, something dangerous. Charlotte felt her heart sink as reality crashed down on her. Suddenly, everything made sense: his alert stance, his evasive answers about his past, and the way he seemed to hide in the city without ever fully engaging. But what should she do with this information? That night, Lucas returned to the bakery after the lights had already been turned off. He was carrying a bag with some supplies and looked exhausted, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Charlotte was behind the counter, pretending to organize some utensils, but her thoughts were in turmoil. She had tried for hours to decide how to approach him, but now that he was here, the moment felt monumental. She watched him for a moment as he straightened his scarf and rubbed his hands together to ward off the cold. Lucas looked more vulnerable than ever, his gaze lost as he dropped the bag on a nearby chair. "I saw something today," she began, her voice louder than she intended. Lucas stopped, his eyes fixed on her with intensity. "Something on the phone?" For a moment he didn't respond. The silence between them seemed to stretch, heavy and full of tension. He knew exactly what she had seen, I didn't need to ask. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I imagined this moment would come." Charlotte crossed her arms, trying to hold her ground even as her mind seemed to swirl with possibilities and doubts. "So is it true? Are you, him? The CEO of one of these big companies?" Lucas shook his head, a bitter smile appearing on his lips. I was. Now, I'm just a man trying to figure out what to do with what's left of my life." "Why are you here?" she pressed, her voice shaking slightly. "Maplewood isn't the kind of place for someone like you." Lucas leaned against the counter, his dark eyes meeting hers. "Because I needed a place where no one knew me. A place where I could breathe." His tone was direct, but there was something more, something almost begging her to understand. Charlotte felt her initial anger melt away, giving way to a confused mixture of compassion and concern. "But that doesn't change the fact that you're hiding, and now that I know that, what do you expect me to do? Lucas looked away, his posture tense as if carrying the weight of an impossible decision. Nothing. I don't expect anything from you. Just, don't tell anyone. She was silent for a long moment, watching him. He looked smaller than the confident man who had walked into the candy store weeks ago. And through it all, Charlotte felt something deeper well up inside her, a connection she couldn't ignore, even if she wanted to. I won't say anything, she finally muttered. But I need to know one thing, is this temporary? Or will you disappear as quickly as you appeared? Lucas stared at her, the pain in his eyes almost palpable. I don't know, Charlotte, I still don't know what I'm going to do. But I know I don't want to hurt you. Or Lily. The mention of her daughter made Charlotte blink, as if she had been brought back to the present. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the turmoil inside her. Okay, she said, her voice soft. But that doesn't mean I trust you. That night, Lucas returned to his cabin feeling more exposed than he had ever been. Charlotte knew, and, worse than that, she seemed to understand something that he himself couldn't define. For the first time in years, he feared not for his company, his career, or his reputation, but for losing the only authentic connection he had found in so long. And Charlotte, as she tried to sleep, couldn't shake her thoughts about Lucas. There was more to him than the papers said, she knew that. But she also knew that getting too close could mean a risk she wasn't willing to take, not for herself, and certainly not for Lily. The morning started peacefully, like almost every other morning in Maplewood, with the sky dyed in shades of icy blue and the first rays of sunlight illuminating the accumulated snow. At the bakery, Charlotte was placing a tray of fresh muffins on the counter, while Lily, sitting on a nearby stool, colored a picture with colored markers. The doorbell jingled from time to time, announcing the arrival of regular customers. The peace seemed absolute, but Charlotte felt something unusual in the air, a quiet nervousness that she couldn't identify. This discomfort took shape when a group of strange people entered the door. They weren't the usual tourists, curious about the sweets or enchanted by the Christmas decorations. They were reporters. Charlotte realized this the moment she saw the cameras, the notepads, and the predatory gazes. She swallowed hard as a man in a suit approached, adjusting his glasses before speaking with a fake smile. Miss Green, correct? Could you give us a moment? Charlotte felt her heart quicken, a wave of uneasiness running up her spine. She held onto the counter to steady herself, her mind already spinning with possible explanations for this. Can I help with something? He asked, keeping his voice steady despite his growing fear. Yes, of course, continued the man. We'd like to talk about your connection with Lucas Graham. The name fell through the air like a stone into water, creating ripples that spread throughout the room. Charlotte saw the other customers look in her direction curiously, while the reporter's forced smile seemed more threatening than friendly. Lily, sensing the tension, stopped drawing and looked at her mother with wide eyes. Luke Graham? Charlotte repeated, trying to sound confused, but feeling the weight of truth in every word. Yes, the renowned businessman, involved in recent controversies. Our sources indicate he is staying here in Maplewood. More specifically, that he has been frequenting your bakery. Charlotte felt her throat go dry. What were they insinuating? She looked at Lily, who looked even more scared. I don't know what you're talking about, he replied, keeping his voice low and controlled. The confusion quickly turned into a riot when a second reporter began taking photos, despite Charlotte's protests. Please leave, she said, trying to remain calm, but her voice already carried a desperate tone. This is a private space. The bakery doors opened again, but this time it was Lucas who entered. He stopped in his tracks, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. When he saw the reporters, the tension on his face was evident. Without thinking, he advanced to the counter, positioning himself between Charlotte and the journalists like a shield. He arrives. This is unnecessary and unacceptable, he said, his voice low but full of authority. If you want to talk to me, do it somewhere else. The room was silent for a moment, but the reporters didn't seem willing to back down. One of them pointed at Charlotte. So, do you confirm that you are staying here? And who has a relationship with Miss Green? Charlotte felt her face burn. Lily grabbed his hand tightly, seeking comfort. Lucas took a step forward, his icy gaze like an impenetrable barrier. I will not answer any more questions here. And if you continue to bother her, I will make sure there are consequences. The journalists exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with Lucas's firm stance. After a few tense seconds, they began to leave, grumbling about missed opportunities. When the door finally closed, Charlotte let out a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. But the relief was brief. She looked at Lucas, who was still standing like a statue, his shoulders rigid and his jaw tense. What was that? She asked, her voice cutting like a blade. I knew you were hiding something, but I didn't think it would involve me. Lucas turned to face her, pain evident in his eyes. Charlotte, I'm sorry. He looked at Lily, who was still holding her mother's hand, then lowered his voice. I never wanted you or her to be dragged into this. Charlotte shook her head, trying to organize her thoughts. The chaos of the morning seemed to have shattered all the tenuous trust they had built. What else didn't you tell me? They said, a relationship? Is that what they think? Lucas hesitated, and his silence was more revealing than any answer. Charlotte sighed, running her hands over her face. I can't do this, Lucas. Not with Lily. I work hard to create a safe environment for her, for me, and now this. She shook her head again, unable to finish the sentence. Lucas took a step toward her, his eyes desperate. I'll sort it out, I promise. I never wanted this to happen. But before she could respond, Lily looked at him, her voice low but full of meaning. Are you leaving? Lucas stopped, the question seeming to hit him like a physical blow. He looked at the girl, then to Charlotte. Not now, he finally said, his voice full of resigned sadness. Not even guarantee that you are well. Charlotte did not answer. She didn't know if she trusted him, but something in her expression said he was telling the truth. That night Lucas isolated himself in the cabin, desperately trying to find a solution to the mess his presence had caused. Meanwhile, Charlotte was awake, watching Lily sleep. The vision of his daughter, so innocent, brought tears in Charlotte's eyes. She didn't know how to protect Lily what she was about to come, but she knew she needed to try, even if it meant to push Lucas away from her lives. The snow fell heavily that night, drowning the sounds of the outside world and involving Maplewood in an illusory tranquility. Charlotte was sitting in the small kitchen of the confectionery, a cup of hot tea between her hands, but her gaze was lost. Lily slept upstairs, finally resting after the riot of the day, but Charlotte couldn't get rid of the tension on her chest. The doorbell sounded, weak and almost inaudible, but enough to pull her from her thoughts. Lucas entered, the coat covered with snowflakes, his hair messed by the wind. He seemed exhausted, but determined. Charlotte, not even getting up, looked at him with a mixture of tiredness and irritation. You should not be here, he said, the voice loaded with a calculated force. Lucas stopped at the entrance, breathing deep before answering. We need to talk. Charlotte laughed, but the sound was dry and without humor. About what? About how did your secret life become my life upside down? Or how should I keep pretending that none of this matters? He slowly advanced, taking off his coat and placing him on a chair. Charlotte noticed the hesitation in each movement. He was tense, as if stepping on enemy territory. I never wanted that, he started, the low, but firm voice. And if I could go back in time and avoid it all, I would. Charlotte stared at him, his eyes shining angrily and something deeper, disappointment. So why are you here now, Lucas? Because you deserve to know the truth. The statement stopped in the air, heavy and inescapable. Lucas sat in front of him, the elbows backed at the table, his hands intertwined as if preparing to confess a crime. It all started a year ago, he started, the voice embargoed by the weight of memory. My company, Graham Innovations, was at the top. We developed technology that revolutionized communication, and I trusted my team as if they were my family. Especially in my best friend, Ethan. Charlotte realized the way he pronounced the name, with a contained bitterness that seemed to erode every word. I put my confidence in him, handed part of the company's control into his hands. But he... Lucas stopped, his eyes diverting for a moment. He used it against me. He did fraudulent business in my name, diverted money, and when it all began to crumble, he let the blame fall on me. Charlotte felt a tightness in her chest. She could see the raw pain on his face, the struggle to maintain the composure while reviving something that clearly still haunted him. You were betrayed, she said softly, more to herself than to him. Lucas laughed, but the sound was empty. Yes. And when it all came to light, the media did the best. They painted me like the villain, the greedy CEO who only thinks of profits. I lost everything, my reputation, my confidence in people, my peace. He stopped, taking a deep breath before continuing. Maplewood was my escape. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I needed to remember who I was first of all. Charlotte was silent, absorbing her words. There was something disarmed in Luke's honesty, the vulnerability that he rarely allowed him to transpare. She wanted to feel angry, wanted to shout that he should have told everything before. But instead he felt a mix of empathy and sadness. You should have told me before, she finally said, the smoother voice. I could have understood. Lucas looked at her, the eyes full of something that seemed regret. I know. But how could I ask that from you? I have already brought enough problems to your life. Charlotte took a deep breath, resting her hands on the table. You are not the only one with problems, you know? She saw the surprise on his face and continued. I have my own fears, Lucas. Every day, I wonder if I'm doing enough for Lily. If I'm giving her a good life, if I can keep this confectionery working. She stopped, trying to contain the emotion she threatened to overflow. I try to be strong, but there are days when everything seems to fall apart. I do the best I can. Lucas reached out, hesitating before touching her slightly. Charlotte, your strength is something I admire more than I can express. For a moment, silence involved them, but it was a different silence loaded with understanding, something that did not need to be said in words. Charlotte found Lucas's gaze, and for the first time did not see the distant CEO or the man on the run. He saw someone as lost as she, but somehow was finding a path beside her. But then Luke drifted his hand, his expression hardening slightly. "That's why I need to leave, Charlotte." The words hit her like a blow. "What? I can't stay. Not while my presence here puts you and Lily in danger. The media will keep chasing me, and this will only get worse if they think they have something to explore here." Charlotte shook her head, feeling the desperation grow inside him. "Lucas, you don't have to. I need," he interrupted, his voice firm, but loaded with pain. "Because the last thing I want is to hurt you." Charlotte felt the tears sprout, but didn't drop them. She just nodded slowly, not knowing what to say. Lucas got up, taking the coat, but hesitated on the door. "Thank you, Charlotte, for everything." And then he left, leaving Charlotte alone in the kitchen, the sound of the doorbell still echoing in the air. The snow had stopped, but the sky of Maplewood remained overwhelmed, as reflected the emptiness that Charlotte felt on his chest. It was a silent morning in the confectionery. The sound of the doorbell, which always brought a slight comfort, now it seemed a cruel reminder that he was no longer there. Lily drew on a sheet of paper, but even her energy was more contained than usual. "Mom, will he come back?" Lily's voice was soft but loaded with expectation. Charlotte stopped organizing the shelf with dishes, feeling the weight of the question. She turned to her daughter, looking for words that would not hurt, but not lies either. "I don't know, honey. He said he needs to solve some important things. But he promised to come back, didn't promise it?" Lily insisted, with bright eyes of hope. Charlotte nodded slowly. "Yes, he promised." But promises, she knew, they were as fragile as the snowflakes they now melted as they touched the floor. Lucas drove along the snow-covered roads that took him out of Maplewood. The cabin he had rented, the market, the brightness of the square, everything seemed distant now, like a dream he could barely believe he lived. Her fingers squeezed the steering wheel, but her mind was far, fixed on Charlotte and Lily. He remembered Lily's laugh when she called him a bouquet, the way she pulled her hand confidently, as if he were a natural part of her lives. And Charlotte, her contained laugh, her skilled hands that turned simple ingredients into something magical, the strength she showed even when she was clearly exhausted. Why did he feel that he was leaving more than just a city behind? In the confectionery, the days passed, but Lucas's absence was felt in every small detail. Lily, usually chatter, was quiet. She spent more time drawing and less time asking about the world around her. Charlotte tried to keep the store's energy, but something was different. It was as if the vitality that Lucas had brought with his presence had gone away with him. One morning, while organizing the remaining Christmas ornaments, Charlotte found the makeshift bouquet Lily had given Lucas the first time he entered the store. It was just a pile of branches of pine and gold ribbons, but holding it brought a wave of emotion that she was not prepared to face. She sat in a chair and allowed the tears to finally fall. It wasn't just the absence of Lucas. It was what he had represented: a hope, a connection, a break in his carefully built routine. He had shown her that perhaps there was room for her life for something else, but now everything seemed to have been torn before he was rooted. Lucas, in New York, faced a completely different battle. The cold glow of the skyscrapers did not have the heat of Maplewood. The meetings were tense, the busy lawyers, and every news that came upon him seemed a cruel reminder of how his life had come out of the tracks. But in the midst of all this, it was in Charlotte and Lily that he thought. At night, in the silent apartment, he took the bouquet he had taken with him, holding him like an anchor. Why was it so hard to stay away from them? One night in the confectionery, Charlotte was closing her doors when she heard soft steps on the sidewalk. For a moment, her heart shot, waiting to see Lucas stop there, with a snow-covered coat and that hesitant smile she had learned to enjoy. But it was just the wind, dragging dried leaves down the deserted street. She locked the door, turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to the small apartment above the store. Lily was already sleeping, and Charlotte sat next to her, watching her daughter's serene face. "You miss him, aren't you?" He whispered to the void, knowing the answer was obvious. She herself felt. He missed Lucas in a way that scared her. It wasn't just his physical presence, but the way he had filled spaces that Charlotte didn't even know they were empty. Lucas finally made a decision. He knew he could not continue like this, divided between the chaos of his ancient life and the peace he had found in Maplewood. He needed to solve everything at once, so that when he came back, and he knew he would come back, he could offer something real. He sent a short message to Charlotte: "I'm solving everything. Take care. I'm thinking of you." Charlotte has read the message several times, each word nailing into her heart. It wasn't enough, but it was something. The snow fell into big flakes that morning, covering Maplewood with a fresh, bright layer that made the Christmas lights look even more vibrant. Charlotte was in the confectionery, watching the streets move through the window while the aroma of gingerbread filled the air. It was the eve of the Christmas closing festival, and the whole city looked excited, but her heart was heavy. Since Lucas's departure, she had been thrown at work, trying to ignore the persistent void he had left. Lily talked less about him now, but sometimes Charlotte perceived the girl looking at the confectionery door, as if expecting him to enter any moment. Charlotte shook her head, pushing her thoughts away. She had things to do, orders to deliver, and the doorbell rang. The sound was so familiar, but this time it seemed different, stronger, more meaningful. When she looked up, the air came out of her lungs. There he was, Lucas Graham. He was standing at the entrance, the dark coat contrasting with the snow on his shoulders. He looked nervous, his hands stuck in his pockets, but his eyes were fixed on her, full of something Charlotte could not decipher. "Lucas," she said, the name coming out like a whisper. He stepped forward, then another, until he was a few feet from her. "Charlotte, I came back." She laughed, but the sound was full of unbelief. "I realized," she answered, crossing her arms in an automatic defense gesture. Lucas took a deep breath, as if preparing for something monumental. "I solved everything. I cleaned my name. My company is in order again. But this is not the most important now." Charlotte arched an eyebrow, but did not respond, waiting for him to continue. "Most importantly," he said, his voice faltering, "is that I realized he was losing something much bigger. You, Lily. You gave me something I didn't even know you needed." She swallowed hard, feeling her heart accelerate. "Lucas, why are you here?" "Because I couldn't stay away," he said, the tone full of almost painful sincerity. "Because all I did since I went out was thinking of you, how you made me feel alive." Charlotte felt the tears start burning in her eyes, but flashed quickly, fighting them. "Lucas, you can't just go back and—" "I know," he interrupted, his voice desperate. "I know I can't expect you to trust me again so easily. But I needed to go back, Charlotte. I needed to say that you changed everything to me. That I want to be someone better, for you and Lily." The words hovered in the air, heavy and full of emotion. Charlotte felt divided, an inner battle between the pain he had caused to leave and the undeniable heat his presence brought. I don't know if I can, Lucas," she said, her voice failing. "You left me. Left Lily. How can I know you won't do it again?" Lucas stepped forward, but stopped, respecting the distance she seemed to need. "I cannot promise that we will never face difficulties. But I can promise that I won't give up. You both gave me something I didn't know was missing, a family." Charlotte felt the tears finally escape, but did not move. She wanted to believe him, wanted to open her heart, but fear still held her. "Mommy?" Lily's voice broke the silence. Charlotte turned and saw her daughter standing at the top of the stairs, rubbing her sleepy eyes. When she saw Lucas, her eyes widened. "Lord Bouquet." Before Charlotte could react, Lily ran down and jumped in Lucas's arms. He held her easily, her hesitant smile becoming genuinely radiant. "I said I would come back, Lily," he said softly, his embargoed voice. Charlotte watched the scene, her heart squeezing. Seeing Lily's happiness and kindness on Lucas's face stirred something deep inside her. She knew deep down that he was telling the truth. Lily pulled Lucas's hand, bringing him closer to Charlotte. "Did he tell you? What did he come back for us?" Charlotte laughed, a short and emotion-filled laugh. "Yes, honey," he told. Lily looked at her mother, her face is full of expectation. "So he can stay?" Charlotte looked at Lucas, seeing the man who had changed so much since the day he first entered the confectionery. She saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the determination in her posture. He had returned, and she knew this was not something he did lightly. "Maybe," she finally said, her soft voice. "Maybe we can find it together." Lucas smiled, a smile full of relief and hope. "Thank you, Charlotte," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Thank you for giving me a chance." The snow fell softly on Maplewood, covering the square with a white layer that looked untouched, magical. The Christmas lights blinked in sync with the music that played in the background, a cheerful melody that accompanied the buzz of animated voices. The closing festival of the Christmas season had begun, and the city was full of people who laughed, danced, and shared the warmth of a community that always seemed to be united. Inside the Green and Company confectionery, the smell of cinnamon and hot chocolate filled the air, while customers entered and left with radiant smiles. Charlotte was behind the counter, but this time she wasn't alone. Lucas, on apron and folded sleeves, took care of a request while Lily, in her favorite stool, made a design with colored pencils. Charlotte observed the scene for a moment, allowing himself to stop and absorb everything. There was something so natural in Luke in that environment, as if he had always belonged there. He laughed at something that an elderly client had said, his serious voice contrasting with the surrounding animated sound. And Lily, the girl, looked lighter, brighter. Charlotte knew Lucas had something to do with it. "Mommy." Lily called her, drawing with both hands. "Just look. It's us on Christmas Eve." Charlotte approached and saw the sheet full of colorful shapes. In the drawing was an illuminated Christmas tree, a man with messy hair, clearly Lucas, a woman in apron, Charlotte, and a small girl with a red dress. The three were holding hands, surrounded by stars and hearts. "It's perfect, honey," said Charlotte, smiling with a heat that came from inside. Lily handed the paper to Lucas. "This is for you to keep it, Sir Bouquet." Lucas laughed, accepting the drawing as if it were a prize. "I think I never had something so special, Lily." That night, when the festival was in the middle of steam, Lucas and Charlotte went to the square with Lily among them. The gizzes of the horses of the sleigh ride echoed through the air, mixing with the sound of kids playing and the lively conversation of the residents. The whole square seemed to shine with a welcoming energy, a perfect reflection of Maplewood. Charlotte noticed how Lucas greeted people, his genuine smile and his kind words. He had become part of that community, someone who was now recognized not like the CEO of a distant company, but as a man who was part of that small world. "That sled ride looks fun, don't you think?" Lucas asked, looking at Charlotte with a sparkle in his eyes. She laughed, shaking her head. "I don't know. Last time you participated in something like this, Lily ended up promoting you to the official Christmas decorator." Lily laughed, holding her hands as she pulled Lucas closer to the tree. "Let's go, please." And there they were again, together in a sled decorated with flashing lights. The sound of the gizzes filled the air as the sleigh advanced slowly through the snow, and Lucas, sitting between Charlotte and Lily, seemed to absorb every second. "The view is beautiful," Lily said, pointing to the lights that shone in the distance. "Yes, it is," agreed Charlotte, but his eyes were fixed on Lucas. He turned to her, feeling the weight of her gaze, and a soft smile formed on her lips. "Thanks for letting me be part of it," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. Charlotte did not answer immediately. Instead, she held his hand, a simple but meaningful gesture. It wasn't just gratitude or forgiveness. It was love. Back in the confectionery, the night approached the end. Most customers had already left, and the space was immersed in a comfortable silence. Lily slept on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face relaxed in a smile. Lucas was next to Charlotte, helping her to organize the latest ornament boxes. But then he stopped, looking at her with an expression that made Charlotte's heart accelerate. "I never imagined I would find something like this," he said, his voice soft. "Something like what?" "That. You. Lily." He stopped, struggling to find the right words. "I thought all I had was work, that my life was defined by what I built. But you showed me that what really matters is who you have by your side." Charlotte felt the tears sprout, but they were hot and full of emotion. "I also thought I had everything under control. But then you appeared and messed up." She laughed slightly, and Lucas accompanied her, although they both knew the weight behind the words. They were silent for a moment, just looking at each other. And then Lucas stepped forward, holding his hands firmly. "I don't go anywhere, Charlotte. I promise." She smiled, a smile that was brighter than any light in the square. "I know." On Christmas morning, while Maplewood still awakened, Charlotte, Lucas and Lily were gathered around a small tree at home. Lily launched her gifts enthusiastically, and Luke laughed at her witty commentary. Charlotte watched them both, feeling something I had not experienced for a long time: peace. While Lily ran to get another gift, Lucas looked at Charlotte, taking her hand. "This is the best Christmas of my life," he said, his fixed eyes on hers. And Charlotte knew at that moment that it didn't matter what the future brought. They would find a way to face him together. Our story for today comes to an end, friends, but before we say goodbye, I need your help to keep this rhythm of stories alive. If this story moved, inspired, or simply entertained you, don't hesitate to give this video a like. It's as simple as a click, but it means the world to us. Do you want more stories like this one? Then subscribe to Happiness of Love and don't forget to activate the notification bell so you never miss any of our new adventures. Remember, we have a new video every 2 days. Share this video with your friends and family, who knows? You might inspire someone to make a positive change in the world. Leave us a comment letting us know which part of the story touched your heart the most. We love reading your thoughts and connecting with you. And if you're watching this on your phone, don't forget to hit the hype button to show your enthusiasm and help us reach even more people with these inspiring stories. Thank you for being part of the Happiness of Love community. Your support is like the heartbeat of this channel, vital and full of life. Oh, and before you go, check out the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another amazing story you won't want to miss. See you in 2 days with another story that will take your breath away. Until then, keep the rhythm of love and inspiration alive, one beat at a time.